State. But, let's talk about what was lost within these 6 months. Some people have said that, a lot of jobs were lost. But again, the argument will be which jobs? Is it the jobs of the political office holders, or are these real-time jobs for citizens? But a lot was lost. Nothing was happening in the state. Yes, there was a sole administrator, but some people will say he did not do anything. Developmental projects were stalled. He was just paying salaries. Nothing really happened in the state. Help us understand, because you've been very consistent on this issue of Rivers State. So help us understand the kind of loss that have been incurred within these 6 months of Fubara suspension.
Well, definitely there will be some losses here and there. In every war situation, you don't even expect that there will be any meaningful development. That's the way I want to describe it, because there was a serious challenge, and then of course something had to be done. It was, for me, the sole administrator was just an interventionist person there. He was just there to intervene, to bridge whatever challenges, and then when the situation is relaxed, they can continue. Now, let me also tell you, for those who say jobs were lost, yes, jobs could be lost, but the civil servants continue to do their job, and they were paid adequately. In fact, the other day, they gave an award to the sole administrator, thanking him for being, one of the best they've ever had. So that's by the way. Then for those who felt that jobs were lost, maybe contractors, but don't forget that some were still on site until probably when they had challenges with funding, because the the budget, there was no budget like the Supreme Court said, and then of course there needed to be another budget which the president presented to the National Assembly, and of course it wasn't going to be easy to get that out and get the funding. So maybe some contractors were not paid, and some had to leave the site and all that. So of course that delayed the process. But let me also tell you, when there's crisis, when there's a fight, you do not expect that these things will be normal. There will always be an abnormal situation. So for me, I think that, yes, those who felt that, like political appointees who felt they lost their jobs, it's natural. There's no way they'll be happy. But don't forget that even if the governor was there, it's also possible that he may have also dropped some of them, and appointed new people. So there's nothing that says that once you appoint people that you don't have the right to fire. You can hire and fire at any time. And then again, there were people that were also appointed within this period, and some of them actually discharged their duties well, while some failed. As normal, it's always the case, even where you have a full democratic structure, so it's not always perfect. So, but whatever they may have lost within the 6 months period, I think that the proper thing is to get things done right. Don't forget, it's not just about President Tinubu's declaration of state of emergency. The Supreme Court spoke loud and clear that there was no governors and no government in Rivers State. There was no budget in Rivers State. Nothing was happening. So the important thing now is that this whole thing has been corrected. And I think that from now on, we won't be having issues. The governor will present his budget, maybe appropriation supplementary or whatever it is, to the State Assembly led by Martins Amehule and the full House. Yeah. And then they will do the needful. And of course, they know they don't.
Yeah, Madam Obiaruko, they say government is a continuum, but what we saw in Rivers State, governance stopped. But we need to ask questions. Yeah. A budget of 1.485 trillion naira was approved for the sole administrator. A lot of people expected, and I believe funds were also released. A lot of people expected to see, projects started by Similai Fubara either being completed or at least work ongoing. Contractors should be paid to return to site, and people expected to see a lot because he presented his budget to the National Assembly. So he should also be held accountable. 1.485 trillion approved by the Senate. But for 6 months, nothing happened in Rivers State. And also using the state of emergency. In this case, they say, using the state of emergency, to say that it's because there's a state of emergency, that is why everything was on standstill. That does not justify it, because his budget was approved. And this approval was not just for paying salaries.
Well, Femi, I can remember clearly that even the budget presentation was not done immediately he came into office. It took quite some time. You know, there were back and forth, even with the National Assembly. It wasn't easy to get it passed and approved. And again, I'm not going to sit here and, you know, begin to say that 1.45 trillion was released and then nothing happened. I do not want to believe that the president will be so careless, you know, to release that, because he was overseen. He's actually running the state, because the state the sole administrator was just his agent. Let me put it like that. So there's no way the president would have allowed that kind of money to go down the drain. And let me also tell you, even when budgets are passed, when there's a democratic structure, when there's a sitting governor, it does not necessarily mean that the money, the figures you see, have been released or have been generated. Don't forget, some are going to be coming from federal allocation, some will come from IGR. Now, the important thing is for us to see the records of the man. Let's see the notes, his handover notes, and see what he did, how much he received, and how much he was able to expend, and then what is left for the governor to start off with. So until that is done, before we now run into conclusions, I do not want to subscribe to the fact that the man came there and for 6 months or whatever, he spent 1.something trillion and then he will walk away like that. Things don't work like that. If he did that, of course, he's going to account for it. The laws are clear and he will be held accountable and responsible. And like I said, the president appointed him, the president presented the budget on his behalf, and then if the National Assembly approved it, and this money was released through the Ministry of Finance, it is also the responsibility of the president to ensure that the money was utilized well. If it was not, well, we have the president to call out to ask questions. It's not just about the sole administrator. The president may be here to tell us what exactly he knows that went wrong, because he was, like you normally have the supervising president or supervising minister or whatever. In this case, he is the supervising governor, as it were, as of the sole administrator. So I do not want to just jump into conclusions, because people are always in a hurry to banter words and throw figures around without having any proof, you know, to what they say. Any claims we make, we must be able to come up with figures, facts and figures, present it to the public, and we can look at it. So until that happens, when the governor sits down, looks at the books, and then tells us, because we're going to ask questions, and he comes out to say, yes, money was spent, this is how much of the state received. Or when he begins to ask for more funds, we'll now ask questions, what happened to the money that the sole administrator left? So these are issues we are going to be looking at probably when the governor settles down and the state assembly. Don't forget, the state assembly has a role to play too. They cannot just sit down and fold their hands and allow this kind of money to be filtered. So we are going to call them to question, to ask why and what happened. So until that is done, I want to leave it at that, believing that being a disciplined military officer, he shouldn't, you know, go the way and the path of some politicians do. So that's it.